Again, the uptick in neurological disease, depression, bipolar, we've seen go through the roof over the past 5 or 6 years. Every neurological disease has a vascular component, and we can measure this through functional MRIs, through SPECT scans, but there's a loss of regulation of blood flow to the brain. And that loss of regulation of blood flow is secondary to a loss of nitric oxide production. So your brain, your neurons can't fire if they're not getting the oxygen, the nutrients, the neurotransmitters, the amino acids they need to do their job. So if you don't have sufficient blood flow, which we call focal ischemia, in the brain, then you develop neurological disease. We have to improve cerebral blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, for instance, for memory recall and cognition. Without adequate nitric oxide production, you can't dilate those blood vessels to improve perfusion and blood flow to recall memory and to improve the cognitive function, the higher functions of the brain. So every aspect about neurological disease, whether it's cognitions, Parkinson's, bipolar, depression, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, all are characterized by a loss of regulation of blood flow. If we can restore nitric oxide, we can perfuse the brain and deliver the proper nutrients and amino acids and neurotransmitters so the brain can do its job. Again, with any neurological condition and mood, it's all dependent upon regulation of blood flow to certain regions of the brain upon demand. So either through SPECT scans or functional MRIs, we can see in people with mental disorders, with mood changes, that there's a loss of regulation of blood flow to certain regions of the brain. And that's due to the lack of nitric oxide production. We call that endothelial dysfunction. Obviously, the neurons have their own nitric oxide synthase too. So it's not just a vascular component of the central nervous system, but it's the neurons and the abilities of the neurons to function. And a lot of this depends upon the enzyme nitric oxide synthase that we have to recouple, maintain the normal structure and function of that enzyme. So now we can allow these neurons to fire, allow for cellular communication, and perhaps most importantly, get blood flow and regulate blood flow and perfusion to all parts of the brain. Biochemically and physiologically, migraines are what's considered vasospasms. Vasospasms occur when you lose the vasoactivity of the blood vessel. So it's an imbalance between vasodilator, vasoconstrictor molecules. Nitric oxide's a vasodilator, so if you lose the ability to produce nitric oxide, the vasoconstrictive effects of the blood vessel become predominant. And then so the vasospasms will cause the migraine. So if we can restore the production of nitric oxide, restore endothelial function, then the vasospasms go away. And it's not just cerebral vasospasms, we see coronary vasospasms. You can restore the balance of vasoactive molecules, nitric oxide, I think, being one of the most important. And you can alleviate not only the duration and the severity of migraines, but actually alleviate the onset and progression of those.